All right, today we soar with the vultures in the 1975 classic 3 Days of the Condor. Hi, this is Dan
And Tom.
of SpyMovieNavigator.com on a show cracking the code of spy movies. Let's see who the prey is here in this spy movie, which has influenced more spy movies to come. One of our listeners, Mark Geiger, suggested we do 3 Days of the Condor. So thanks, Mark. We agree with Mark. We're selecting 3 Days of the Condor because it is right in the middle of the modern spy movie movement. During the James Bond push, after 3 Harry Palmer movies, and now the public is really waiting to see more spy movies. So here, with some big stars, comes this spy movie. All right. The movie is based on a novel by James Grady called 6 Days of the Condor from 1974.
All right, so Robert Redford is Joseph Turner, a CIA researcher who has a cover of working for the American Literary Historical Society. As a researcher with the codename Condor, he gets paid to read books in which he has to find potential scenarios that could possibly be used in intelligence work.
We see Turner arrive at an office building on a motorized bike while someone in a car is watching and has a list with 8 names on it, and 6 are scratched off already. Hmm.
A
I'm
list in a
thinking
movie.
I'm thinking of the 1963 movie, The List of Adrian Messenger already. There is a list in that movie as well of potential murder victims. So, what's happening here? All right, here we see that the man in the car just proceeds to scratch off Turner's name. What? We're immediately drawn into the story in a big way. The only name remaining on the list is Mr. Ralph Heidegger. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think this is a good start. Now, Turner's name got crossed off as the guy with the listed pictures of everybody. And it
Yeah.
looks like he crossed off their names when they got to work because Turner was going into work.
Yeah.
So now, to set the stage for the rest of the plot line to unfold, a messenger service truck pulls up to the address, which was number 55,
Yep.
and delivers something in the rain. And the guy who was in the car watching Turner is now in a phone booth. You remember those, Dan? Phone booths?
Yeah.
This was
Yeah. Phone booths. Yeah.
this was way before cell phones. Now the guy's in the phone booth with that list in his hand, so he must be calling somebody to tell him who's there.
Yeah. In the meantime, Turner exits the building through the back because of the rain, and he goes to a restaurant to pick up sandwiches for the rest of the office.
Now, there's two things I want to say about this. First is there's some interplay in the office, and you get a little feel for who this Turner guy is. But then the
Yes.
other one is, I know, Dan, you and I like movie locations, and there's a
Yes.
bunch of them in this movie. And we're not going to call them all out here, but this one I want to call out because you don't see the name of the restaurant that he goes into, but it really does exist, and it still exists. It's the Lexington Candy Shop, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year.
Yeah.
And it's still there at 1226 Lexington, which is between 82nd and 83rd Streets in Manhattan.
Yes.
And the pictures, I haven't been there, but if you look at the pictures online right now, they look very similar to the way it looked when Condor was shot there.
Yep.
So if you like movie filming locations, get some lunch here when you're in New York.
All right, now the action begins. A mailman gets access to the building and brings in the guy from the car and another guy who proceeds to shoot everyone up, killing
Nice
them.
guy.
Yeah, that mailman delivers, including Janice Chow, a name that was also on that list. Whoa. Now, it seems from Turner's interactions with her that maybe Joe Turner here might have feelings for her. That's why we're calling her out, because I think they were a little close. And we'll see later when he discovers what happens that he felt a little more sad when he saw that. All right.
There definitely seemed to be feelings there.
Yeah.
Now, the cool thing I liked about this scene was before they get all into going in and shooting things up, you see this guy standing in the street, and it's Max von Sydow. And he joins them to do the shoot up in the office. And the character's name that Max von Sydow plays is Gilbert. He's my favorite character in Condor. I mean, especially the way the end of the movie works. I mean, he gives his usual stellar performance.
Yes, he
Bo-
does.
And Bond fans will remember him as Ernst Stavro Blofeld and Never Say Never Again.
Yeah. There you go. Turner gets back with the sandwiches now and finds everyone dead. All right. Is this enough to intrigue us yet? I think so.
Yeah, now hang on a second. Let's step back for what you just said.
What?
Can you imagine if this was you? You
No.
go out to lunch, it was raining, you go out to lunch, you get lunch for the team, you come back in the office, and everyone is dead when you get back.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know for me personally, I'd be a total wreck. I mean,
Right.
I don't even know how you'd think about what to do next,
Yeah.
especially if you're not an agent. Remember, he's not an agent. He's just
No,
a
he's not an
reader of the
agent.
agency.
He's
And
a
for
reader.
me, my head would explode and I'd probably either run out of there so fast or curl up in a fetal position and not be able to move.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have that issue.
All right. He finds everyone dead. He's shocked, but he's seemingly calm. He takes the secretary's gun from the drawer and he goes to a phone booth. He calls a hotline at the CIA and Major answers, identifies himself as Condor, Section Department 17, and tells him what has happened.
Listen, you son of a bitch, I'm telling you, I came back with lunch and it was raining and the whole house was murdered. Everybody is dead.
Right. Has the incident been discovered by anyone outside the company?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Are you damaged?
He's instructed to
Find a secure location.
Where?
Avoid any place unknown. Do not go home. Do not go home. Surface again in 2 hours and call the major.
Now, I hadn't watched this movie in a long time. We said we were going to do this. I watched it a couple of years ago. But the way this starts, we can see the influence that 3 Days of the Condor had on the first Mission Impossible movie. In Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt's team is wiped out. And when he calls in after giving the appropriate passcodes, just like Turner did, Ethan tells Kittredge,
they're dead.
What? Who's dead?
My team is dead! Jesus. Galitzin's gone. They knew we were coming, man. They knew we were coming, and the disc is gone.
Are you intact?
and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this influence later, but one big difference is Ethan is a trained spy in Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Turner is an analyst or a researcher in 3 Days of the Condor. He's not an agent.
right.
He's probably closer to what we see in the Tom Clancy Jack Ryan character. But
Yeah.
man, that part in Mission Impossible had to come from 3 Days of the Condor,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
at least influenced by it.
Absolutely. All right. Meanwhile, a cleaning truck pulls up to the office building with the dead bodies and investigates.
I gotta jump in here again, Dan. Sorry, because this cleaning truck totally cracked me up because it was so brilliantly named.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you notice the sign on the side of the truck?
Yeah.
It got its name from something a long, long time ago.
Yes, it did.
The name on the truck was Augean Cleaning Service. Can you remember where you heard the word Augean?
Mhm. Yes, I do. Well, if you go back to the Greek hero Hercules, we've all heard of Hercules, or Heracles if you want, we find the answer. Hercules had 12 tasks, if you recall, that he had to do, called the 12 labors of Hercules. Well, one of them was to clean the Augean stables. Yeah. So this cleaning service was named after that. I love that this little fact is thrown in there just on the side of the truck.
Yeah, exactly. It's just there. If you know it, you know it. If you listen to this episode, now you know it too.
And the implications of it, though, are there because that was a big cleanup job for Hercules. And
Yeah, and it was
this
a big
is
cleanup job because there were a lot of people killed here.
for the CIA here. So I love it. That's a great call. That's a great call. All right. So after the crew surveyed the situation here, they called the New York Center and talked to the deputy director, Higgins. He is told all are dead, 6 dead. Excepting Condor, it should be 7. What? Condor should have been killed as well, of course. So Turner was supposed to be killed. And what about Heidegger? He wasn't in the office.
Yeah, Dan, Higgins said that accepting Condor, meaning they knew Turner was alive, Condor/Turner was alive, because
Yeah.
he's the one who called in the murders.
Yeah.
And so there were 8 names on the list, and the 8th name was Heidegger, who had called in sick and wasn't at work today.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there were supposed to be 7 in the office, but Turner had gone out to lunch. So excepting for Turner, there were 6 dead.
Yeah. I get that. But he wasn't there. And that was the message, right? He wasn't killed. All right, so next Condor goes to an apartment building. He presses a bell for Heidegger. He's looking for Heidegger now. Everyone else is dead, and he gets no answer. So then he presses another button. The guy's name was Argento, and Argento presses the button and lets him in and into the building. And of course, he goes to Heidegger's apartment. The door's unlocked. He walks in, and Heidegger is dead.
They're all
Just like-
dead.
Just like everybody else. Ooh, next, Higgins is instructed to bring in Condor. Cliff Robertson plays Higgins, by the way.
Oh, and I love his hair.
He was outstanding as well. I mean, his eyes. I mean, Robert Redford's eyes in this movie and Higgins, played by Robertson's eyes in this movie. I mean, they're acting as much with their eyes as they do with their lines and everything else. He was fantastic. Anyway.
Oh, Robertson's hair was amazing too.
All the hair was, of course, Robert Redford has his regular, bushy hair. All right. That's all the plot we're going to cover here. But wow, what a start to the movie. Anytime your name is on a list, it probably is not a good thing. Unless maybe it's the Academy Award list. But other than that, you want your name on a list.
All right.
Woo.
And so we're going to stop going through the plot here now because we don't want to give things away. We're only a quarter of the way through the movie at this point. And a lot happens in that first quarter of the movie, and it continues to happen.
Yeah. From what was revealed early on in the movie, we know that Turner trusts a few people. But by the end, we will definitely doubt that this is still the case. When Kathy Hale and Turner get to go their own ways towards the end, he now does not even trust her. And we'll see this.
Are you going right to Vermont?
Yes.
What I mean is don't call anyone. Don't stop, please. Don't tell anyone about it.
Wow. And he even catches himself knowing now, oh my God, I don't even trust her who helped me all this time.
Well, the cover on the DVD says, "Be careful who you trust."
Yeah. And he's good with trusting in the beginning and not so much at the end. There will be clandestine meetings that are suspicious. Players who we have no idea whose side they are on. And yeah, an internal mole. Go figure.
A mole in a spy movie?
Now, how many times will we see that trope post 1975? A lot, right? Mission Impossible, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, James Bond, Bourne, Kingsman, The Golden Circle. Yeah, on.
Absolutely. So we have the mole, but don't forget that there's the reluctant spy part of this movie.
That's
and
true.
We've talked about the reluctant spy in many of our episodes. Bourne, Hannah in the 39 Steps, Jack Ryan, Red Notice, Eggsy and Kingsman, The Secret Service, and even Susan Cooper in the Melissa McCarthy movie Spy are examples of reluctant spies. And there are many more we can talk about. It's a great trope. You take somebody who isn't a trained spy and make them learn on the fly. And it actually becomes a plot point because Joubert makes a comment in the movie about how it's harder to deal with Turner because he isn't trained, so he doesn't know what Turner's going to do. With a trained spy, he knows what Turner will do.
Yeah, because they know what they trained them on.
Yeah. Now, I also thought that not only is Turner thrust into the reluctant spy role, but so is Kathy Hale, who's played by Faye Dunaway.
Yes.
Right. So both of these characters are really reluctant spies during this movie.
Yeah. Now, Faye Dunaway comes into the story because Turner sees her in a store and then follows her out of the store, has his gun, and forces her into her car. So this is how we meet Faye Dunaway as Kathy Hale. And she's in the rest of the story. And again, Faye Dunaway, I mean, she is spectacular here in this movie. Some people have criticized her in this movie, but man, she's not Bonnie from Bonnie and Clyde in this movie, but what she plays here, she does it well.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about her character in a little bit.
Yeah.
I love the way Turner, who's also codenamed Condor, gets Kathy Hale's name. Remember, he isn't an agent, but he's in that store. He overhears her name. in a way that would not happen today, but would happen back then. You got to watch the movie to see how that happens. But I thought it was a very agent-like way to handle this. It was really, really smooth.
Yeah.
Now, Funeral in Berlin, the Harry Palmer movie, may have influenced this movie as well. And we talked about this in part 2 of our look at Funeral in Berlin. So we had a 2-part episode on Funeral in Berlin. And in part 2, we talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, after he takes her in the car, here, Turner goes back to her apartment. And in Funeral in Berlin, Harry Palmer hangs out in the apartment of a woman he just met named Samantha. And he's trying to lay low. Well, here in 3 Days of the Condor, Turner goes to Kathy's apartment so he can lay low, get under the radar, somebody nobody's looking for.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's very similar with one big exception. In Funeral in Berlin, Samantha isn't an innocent civilian.
Right.
But here in the 3 Days of the Condor, Kathy is. She was just a total random woman he accosted, really,
Yeah.
to go to her place.
And Palmer's a spy in Funeral, and Condor is not a spy.
Yeah.
So there's another difference. All right.
But the concept of hanging out, finding a woman hanging out in her place to get under the radar while you figure out what to do.
Yeah, and she was really scared. She was scared, and she did a great job of being scared in the movie because, you know, she's being accosted at gunpoint and thrown back into her car, and now he's in her apartment. And but in her biography, Faye Dunaway said it was kind of cool. She said, "I'm sorry, but the idea of being kidnapped and ravaged by Robert Redford was anything but frightening." It's like, okay, that's kind of cool.
If that was really recent, she would have gotten some grief for that comment.
But
we know what she means.
But in the movie, she is afraid. And actually, I think when they were filming it, he was offset, Robert Redford, and because she wasn't all that afraid of Robert Redford. And I think the director,
Sidney Pollack, yeah.
Sidney Pollack was doing those scenes and coming at her. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, he was more frightening than Redford was to her.
Yeah, so she did look scared. That was good. All right. So 3 Days of the Condor, directed by Sidney Pollack, we just mentioned him, and released in 1975. It's a seminal spy movie that has left a lasting impact on the whole genre. So it's based on the novel 6 Days of the Condor by James Grady, as we mentioned, and the film stars Robert Redford, Faye Dunaway, Cliff Robertson, Addison Powell, and Max von Sydow. That's a cast.
Yes,
That's
it
a
is.
fantastic guy. The acting
It's too bad they couldn't get anybody good to do the parts.
Yeah, the acting is just terrific. Max von Sydow is frightening. There is plenty of mystery as to who is on what side and who really is the enemy here. It's a perfect storm for a spy movie. I mean, just listen to how Max von Sydow as Joubert, the assassin, talks in this movie, and you be frightened too.
I don't interest myself in why. I think more often in terms of when, sometimes where, always how much.
Or when he talks to Turner again a little bit later.
It would happen this way. You may be walking. Maybe the first sunny day of the spring. And a car will slow beside you. And a door will open. And someone you know, maybe even trust, will get out of the car. And he will smile. A becoming smile. But he will leave open the door of the car and offer to give you a lift.
Yeah, I mean, you watch what von Sydow does here with this character Joubert.
Cold.
I mean, it's cold, meticulous, very. I'm an assassin, and that's my job. And he was absolutely fantastic in this role. I've liked him in a lot of things, but I think this might. Not only I think is he my favorite in this movie, I think this is the favorite role I've seen him play. I mean, he's had some bigger roles, but
he's simply brilliant, believable, and unnerving in every scene he's in. I mean, just that good. He wasn't even nominated for an Academy Award for this.
Yeah, how he wasn't up for a Best Supporting, I don't get.
He won some award called the Kansas City Film Critics Circle Award for this role, but wasn't even nominated. All right. Overall, this is a solid spy movie and a must-see for all spy movie fans. Great in itself, but it definitely does impact spy movies to come, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with you on this, Dan. Yeah, absolutely.
This spy movie also looks backwards, too, because it's been influenced by other spy movies, as we said, like Funeral in Berlin that we just mentioned, and the scene there, that it impacts this spy movie, too. We're going to look at some of the good and the really good in this movie, and a couple of criticisms, too. All right.
Well,
let's
we've got to say, hey, here's what critics said about it. So we can talk about whether we agree with them or not.
And what we think. Yeah, what we think. Here we go.
Absolutely. All right. So let's start with this engaging plot and the suspense in this movie.
Yeah.
We just talked about the plot a little bit, and the story here with that plot. It's really an intriguing plot, and it's about really big government, and what happens in places we don't want to look, and it maintains a high tension and suspense throughout as Turner tries to uncover the truth and what has happened at his office. And afterwards, because he's trying to stay alive.
Trying to stay alive.
So this intricate plot is solid, relatively easy to follow. It keeps the viewers engaged.
Yeah.
And it keeps them guessing. You never really know what's going on until the end, which is magic in movies. You're trying to figure it out. You kind of are following it, but you don't exactly get how it's going to turn out. Now, I like movies where it's hard to guess what happens next, especially in spy movies. This is certainly one of them. And it's not like, oh, I can't believe that happened next. It was logical what happened next, but you didn't necessarily think through ahead as you're watching it. Oh, I know what's going to happen. Right. And you'll
really,
find,
it's minute-to-minute action.
Yeah. And you're going to find that you're going to literally be on the edge of your seat at times and constantly wondering what's going on. Where's this going? And there's really no downtime here. I mean, yes, there's a brief love scene between Turner and Kathy Hale that gives us a little break. I mean, it's too bad, this is another one of those things, two really ugly people in bed. Shocking.
Yeah, it does give us a little break, which is a nice breather for us. It's a good moment.
That's
and
true.
we needed a little rest. Right.
Yeah. And it's really about the only time we can relax for a few moments in this movie. I mean, the rest of the movie is anxiety, tension, and determination, trying to figure out what's going on as Turner is trying to figure out what to do next and what's going on.
Secondly, let's look at the realistic and relatable protagonist. This is a well-done movie. Unlike many spy films that feature highly trained agents, Turner is an everyman who uses his intelligence and resourcefulness to survive. The fact Turner was kind of a paid reader is intriguing. An internal analyst guy, kind of like Jack Ryan, like we mentioned, who is now thrust into the thick of the espionage world. Wow. This is refreshing in its own way because we do not know what to expect of this everyday man like us thrown into this kind of thing, who now basically is trying to figure out a spy network on his own, literally on his own.
He's trying to follow all the dots, connect all the dots.
In his research, he uncovered something that got some people anxious, we'll say. This portrayal of Turner makes him relatable and adds a layer of realism to this whole narrative.
Yeah. And as we've mentioned, Turner's job is to read everything. And at one point, Turner asks,
we read adventures and novels and journals. Who'd invent a job like that?
Who would invent a job like that? Well, we've seen this exact job, the reader thing, in the 1960 movie, The Manchurian Candidate. Major Bennett Marco, played by Frank Sinatra, had the same job during that movie. So obviously somebody has invented this job.
Yeah. I mean, we see a lot more movies like this in the future. We're going to see rogue agents We're going to see Mole's uncertainty as to who is who and issues with the bosses and authority in the spy movie world and who's who. I mean, all of that is going to be in tons of spy movies to come. But this early entry in 1975 is really, really good. And I like that Joseph Turner's code name is Condor. Now, Condor is a vulture, an efficient one, by the way. And this is a great code name for this man and his character.
I agree with you. And it made me look up the name. Right?
Yeah.
Because in Native American lore, the condor was a spirit animal. And according to worldbirds.com, we're told that people with the condor spirit animal tend to be introverted and elusive.
Mm-hmm.
And these are traits that Turner definitely has.
Yes.
Plus, there's a scene in the boardroom when John Houseman's character, Mr. Wabash, contemplates about Turner. And he asks, is that why he's still in flight? It could have been a coincidental line, but I doubt it.
I don't think so. All right. Now let's look at the strong performances now, our third big point here. Robert Redford delivers a compelling performance as the lead, balancing vulnerability and determination. It really surprises us how versatile and agile he is and how quick thinking he is. His physical abilities are pretty damn good, and his performance with a gun, since he's a desk guy, a reader, with no background in handgun stuff, I thought he was pretty damn good. He's better than anybody who shoots at Bond.
Yeah, he hits what he's trying to aim for.
Yeah, what the hell? Now, we know through his research that he reads spy stories, he reads novels, he reads real happenings in the world to see if any cartoons, to see if any of these things could really be used in the real CIA world. So we can imagine that he would know many of these techniques in his head and that he seemed smart. He seemed like a bright guy. So applying them, though, I mean, you got them in your head, you read all this stuff, applying them under all this pressure, extreme tension. Wow, that is a stretch to me and a bit of a challenge. But then again, when your life is at stake, anything can happen, you know. But
well, and the good thing with him is he was able to quickly get away from the, oh my God, what happened here, and get his head around it and go, okay, what do I do?
yeah,
And so that was, and Redford does that really well.
He does. Yeah, you got to give him credit. Faye Dunaway, as Kathy Hale, provides strong support and generally gives a solid performance with some good facial expressions. Again, very good facial expressions, tension creating movements, and her dialogue. So she was excellent with that. Max von Sydow, we mentioned, he excels at the methodical assassin, Joubert, and is terrifying every time we see him on the screen. We don't know what he's going to do. Now, in many ways,
Wait, I want to jump in there for 1 second, because that's not just his portrayal, that's also the cinematography of that, right? And how they directed that. So, I mean, it goes hand in hand and it works.
It works. We'll talk about the cinematography. In many ways, he kind of reminds me of Christopher Lee's portrayal of Scaramanga in The Man with the Golden Gun. You know, that was released the year before, in 1974. Cocky, sure of himself, calm.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Now,
so I like that.
A couple other actors or parts in here. I loved Cliff Robertson's portrayal of Higgins. I mean, you can try to read his eyes, and you can't.
You can't.
And that's how good he delivered his lines. And he had complete body movement control that added to the dialogue. I just thought the hair was a little goofy, but other than that, that was a very good performance and a really good character. Now, another one like that kind of was Addison Powell, who played Atwood. Another really good hiring decision there. He played that role well. And then also, I love John Houseman and his portrayal of Mr. Wabash. It's a small role, and Houseman played the type of character that we're used to seeing him in, so it really wasn't a stretch acting-wise for him. But as usual, he does that type of character very well.
Yeah, he does. He was fantastic, actually, I thought, and an image that you would think would be that guy in charge. All right. Let's look at number 4, political intrigue and social commentary, because this is a big point of this movie. The political climate of the 1970s was tense. The Cold War was still raging. There was a lot of distrust in government throughout the world, and especially in the United States, just coming off the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the social revolution of the 1960s, and this was directly in the wake of the Watergate scandal in the United States here. And so this movie is timely. It explores these themes of government corruption, surveillance, and mistrust, and really, I think, the uncertainty in the public's mind as to what really happens behind closed doors of government and spy agencies, and the morality or immorality of what comes with it. This adds depth and relevance to the story for sure, and makes it even more compelling to watch. Being surrounded by real history, this movie makes even more sense. Look back into the 1970s, and there were numerous conspiracy movies. They were all being released simultaneously, basically, fortifying this view that the social atmosphere was untrusting of the government. Just for example, you have All the President's Men, the Parallax View, even Soylent Green, Executive Action, The China Syndrome, Marathon Man. I mean, wow. So the atmosphere was ripe for 3 Days of the Condor.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it was quite topical, not just with this political Big Brother thing,
Yeah.
but what Turner finds out Atwood was doing would be a big political and societal issue that peaked in about 1978 or 1979.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away much more than that, but what Atwood was doing and what Turner discovers, and then a speech at the end by Higgins, which is Cliff Robertson's character, kind of tie that together. And if you were around in 1978, you'll understand exactly what we're talking about. Again, we don't want to give it away, but this underlying plot and why people were getting killed was very much an issue in 1975. And it's even a topic of discussion today, but it
Yeah.
really hit its peak in like 78 or 79.
Also, we have to remember that this was one of the first spy movies where the organization or company was the problem. It wasn't a foreign government or a megalomaniac. In this movie, it was the CIA itself that caused some of these problems. You've heard the term deep state? This is it. And we
Really?
understand and we understand clearly from many messages in this movie what the CIA does, like what other intelligence agencies for other countries do all over the world. It is very gray, not clearly good or bad, but maybe good for the time or good for their country, but gray. So
Yeah,
the
because it
director,
could be bad in the long term.
yeah, the director of the CIA sums it all up when reminiscing about the world wars versus what he does now, when he says,
I miss that kind of clarity.
yeah,
Now, another point of the political intrigue and social commentary comes out of a conversation between Turner and Kathy, because Turner's trying to explain his job to Kathy. And he talks about feeding all of this data into the computer and checks against the CIA plans and other data they've got. And he's looking for leaks and new ideas. Now, remember, this is 1975. What he's talking about doing with the computer is an early version of what we called business intelligence in the late 2010s. That's morphed into the term artificial intelligence. And when I say just, it's more than just the term, but the idea of using the computer for intelligence. So politically, he's using the computer to give him more intelligence about what's happening in the world and what he's reading. And so this is still an important topic in the world of espionage. It was back then, the computer was helping him out, and it is today.
All right, we're going to quickly look at number 5, direction and cinematography. Sidney Pollack's direction is tight and effective, creating a sense of urgency, paranoia, and genuine fear. Really good. The cinematography captures the urban landscape of New York City, enhancing the film's gritty and realistic atmosphere in a good, simple way. We see some back alleys a la 1973's Live and Let Die, back alleys in Harlem. We see gritty, dirty, crowded streets, and it shows that this is kind of a stark situation. On the other hand, I mean, it wasn't a whole heck of a lot more to the cinematography, although, I mean, I'm talking about the pannings and the shots and scenes, but There's some very good shots in the movie for
Yeah,
sure.
there absolutely were, and I like the cinematography a lot. It's not all the grit that you talk about, but remember, this was supposed to be near Christmas time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, they were
guys were
singing Christmas
gray
carols, which
more,
is
yeah. So, there's the Salvation Army guy,
a
stuff
nice
like that.
contrast to what's really going on
Yeah.
with the
Like,
Christmas music. Yeah,
the world is going on around us, and this is happening here in the middle.
yeah.
But I also like, from a cinematography perspective and from the way the set was designed, Kathy's apartment and how they
Yeah,
shot it.
that was
Right?
nice.
We do see other shots of New York, making us feel that, there's shots in Times Square and stuff. So I like that. And they even, the way they did Atwood's house, I mean, that
Yeah,
was really well done, I thought,
that
from a
was
cinematography perspective.
I agree.
Now, speaking of Atwood's house, the scene there reminded me a lot of the scene in Dr. No when Bond meets Dent for the final time. Bond is sitting there waiting for Dent. Here, Turner is waiting for Atwood. And he kind of calls Atwood a little bit. We won't explain how. We watch
Yeah,
the
yeah,
movie.
yeah. That was a good scene. All right. Yeah, I agree. Some of that was good, especially her apartment was excellent. They had the black and white photos because she was a photographer apparently.
Yeah.
And they had the beautiful black and white photos on the wall and stuff. And
So that's
it
the
was some
set,
nice
but also how they
conversation.
filmed it and lighted it. I thought it was well
Yeah,
done.
yeah, yeah. The lighting was great too. Yeah, the shadows and faces and stuff. Yeah, I agree. Now, Pollock had worked with Redford in a couple of years earlier in the 1973 The Way We Were, and he's done some outstanding movies like Out of Africa, Tootsie, The Firm, and a lot more. So he won the Academy Award for Best Director and Best Picture for Out of Africa. So he can direct, and he is superb here in this movie. Actually, I think he worked with Redford on like 7 movies, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Now, Pollock, a la Alfred Hitchcock, made a couple of cameos here.
Yeah, he made a couple. Hitchcock
Yeah.
usually only does one.
Yeah. He was the cab driver who yelled at Turner as Turner ran into the street and almost got hit by the cab. So that was him driving the cab. He was also the guy who said, "Hey, Kathy," when Turner and Kathy Hale were approaching her apartment for the first time. And he was the voice of Kathy Hale's boyfriend calling from Vermont on the phone. So that's kind of cool.
Well, Sidney Pollack has done acting, and
Yeah.
pretty cheap to be able to take 3 parts that you don't really see
Yeah, that's
characters
good.
and make it the same person.
Yeah, I liked it.
All right, now the director of photography here was Owen Roisman, and as I said, there were some nice street shots and some great internal and action shots throughout the movie. Some nice close-ups of Turner and Kathy as they become, I'll just say, involved from violence into tenderness. And he is a well-established cinematographer. He had worked with both Max von Sydow and Sidney Pollack before.
Yeah.
In von Sydow, he worked on The Exorcist in 1973 and Sidney Pollack on Tootsie in 1982. And he does know street shots because, Dan, he also did the 1971 movie, The French Connection. There's some really good street shots there. So you can be sure that what he chose to do in 3 Days of the Condor was intentional, storyboarded, and executed with a plan, and it shows.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the 6th point, atmosphere and tone. We talked a little bit about this already. It's difficult to establish a true and consistent atmosphere and tone in a movie. It's hard to do. This is done through acting, directing, cinematography, color palette, costuming, and more. They do all of that. This movie successfully creates this pervasive atmosphere of paranoia, uncertainty, we mentioned many times, danger, which is essential for any spy thriller. Fantastic. The tone is consistently tense here, which keeps the audience on the edge throughout the movie. Every scene, save the love scene, like we said, has you wondering what will happen next. That is a formula for success.
And I love that they do this without a bunch of gadgets, not a bunch of stunts.
No.
It's pure espionage, suspense, and just really well done.
Yeah.
Realistic action.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's look
there's,
at our last...
there's even a fight in here that kind of reminds you a little bit about Bourne.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of calls to other spy movies for sure. All right, let's look at some of those now. That's going to be our 7th point. Plenty of connections that we have here. And you really see elements of Bourne identity here, not even written until 1980. The story here is Condor. We see lots of other similarities, like the concept of rogue agents. We see it again in Bourne, treadmill, brainwashing, etc. In James Bond, even in License to Kill. Their own agents take a shot at Bond when he's escaping from the Hemingway home, and Quantum of Solace when Bond is taken into custody. I mean, we see the mole concept in many more movies, including Mission Impossible and more. So there you go. One oddity here, though, which is I thought was weird, is in the beginning when Turner is explaining to Kathy Hale what he does, and he was trying to calm her down like he wasn't going to kill her, but he threatened her many times. He shows her his badge, and just for a couple of seconds we see the badge, and it's Tentrix Industries, maybe the cover name for their group, even though you said it was the historical, what was it?
The American Literary Historical Society.
But on both sides of the T are lightning bolts, or what looked like the Nazi SS symbols, Schutzstaffel, the symbol used in World War II.
I totally missed that.
Now, there was an Operation Condor with Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet that was U.S. backed to a degree, where he was going to exterminate his left-wing opposition. This is in 1974, the year before this movie was released. It was described in an official U.S. briefing paper as Plan Condor, as a consortium of the intelligence services of U.S.-backed dictatorships in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Oh, my God. All
wow,
right.
that's a great piece of intelligence there, Dan. Now,
that's weird, isn't it?
I didn't notice the SS thing. Right?
Hey.
That's
It's
pretty
weird.
good. Now, we also have the reluctant spy, or a person who's in the wrong place at the wrong time, who has to help out in sort of a mission. And again, we get that in the 39 Steps, The Lady Vanishes, North by Northwest, and many more. It's not all just Hitchcock, right?
Right.
Now, one thing that confused me a bit with the reluctant spy part here is how good Turner is at doing all of this stuff.
Yeah, we mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah, and Gilbert talks about how tough getting Condor was going to be because he was an amateur. But he does some really detailed spy things. For instance, the way he tracks the number that Gilbert calls is extremely sophisticated.
Yeah.
He had to have access to appear to be a phone company employee when he tracks this down. And how does he know all this stuff? And now I just thought of another connection too, right? I talked earlier about how the agent approaches a woman and hangs out at her place to lay low. And I mentioned Funeral in Berlin. But Jason Bourne uses Marie in a similar fashion in The Bourne Identity.
Yeah, yeah.
So this too is another fairly common trope. In fact, we see it twice in the 39 Steps, because first, Annabella Smith uses Richard Hannay to lay low in his apartment. Yeah. And then Hannay similarly uses Pamela. And there was a fun set of tie-ins to the real world at one point, because Wabash and Higgins are having a conversation about World War II. And Higgins asked Wabash,
"You served with Colonel Donovan in the OSS, didn't you, sir?"
Now, William Donovan was the creator of the OSS. Then Wabash tells Higgins,
"Sailed the Adriatic with a movie star at the helm."
Now, that movie star would have been Sterling Hayden, who had a long movie career, but also served with the OSS in World War II. Yep. And if you don't know who Sterling Hayden is, three of his probably most well-known roles were Brigadier Jack D. Ripper in Dr. Strangelove, Captain McCluskey in The Godfather, and Dix Handley in the Asphalt Jungle. But I just love those two callbacks to real world things.
If you're a Seinfeld fan, the last warning that Joubert gives Turner should sound familiar. Here's Joubert's warning to Turner.
It would happen this way. You may be walking. Maybe the first sunny day of the spring. And a car will slow beside you. And a door will open. And someone you know, maybe even trust, will get out of the car. And he will smile. A becoming smile. But he will leave open the door of the car and offer to give you a lift.
And now, here's the clip from Seinfeld. In the episode The Junk Mail, Newman gives Kramer almost exactly the same speech, but this time it's about what will happen to Kramer for refusing his mail.
"You're in trouble, Kramer. I shouldn't even be talking to you, but I'm telling you as a friend. Here's how it's going to happen. You may be walking. Maybe on a crisp autumn day just like today, when a mail truck will slow beside you and the door will open, and a mailman you know, maybe even trust, will offer to give you a lift.
Are you through?
No, and no one will ever see you again.
And at one point in the 3 Days of the Condor, Turner says to Higgins,
You think not getting caught on a lie is the same thing as telling the truth?
well, different versions of this line can be found in the movies Tootsie, The Firm, The Slender Thread, and The Interpreter, all of which were directed by Sidney Pollack. Oh,
Right. Finally, though I haven't seen the movie Captain America, the Winter Soldier, because I've talked about I'm not a big MCU fan, but it takes a significant part of its storyline from 3 Days of the Condor. And Robert Redford happens to be in that movie. They brought him into Captain America, the Winter Soldier because of this tie-in. And director Joe Russo said of the influence of 3 Days of the Condor on the Winter Soldier, quote, as far as the political thriller history of it, we often joke to ourselves that you could call this movie 3 Days of Captain America because we owed such a debt to 3 Days of the Condor, unquote.
wow. Wow. All right. Let's look at some of the bad things about this movie. The pacing issues. People have complained about the pacing issues. They always complain about pacing issues in movies, as we said. I think just about any movie can be critiqued for this. 3 Days of a Condor is generally well-paced, and there is action and tension throughout, hardly giving you a break. Yet, some viewers find certain parts of the movie slow, especially in the midsection of the movie, where the plot development can seem a bit drawn out. Well, yeah, as Kathy Hale and Joseph Turner develop their relationship, if you will, you can feel a bit of slowness. But for my part, I think that is the only time we get a little break. So I'm good with that. It's like us getting a break in Bond movies when Q is engaged with Bond. It's fun. It's a break. It's a breather. Sometimes we need it. The original book is called 6 Days of the Condor, for crying out loud. Come on, they cut out 3 days here. What can you expect?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I actually think the movie is very well paced. I mean, they kept it under 2 hours, which I like.
Yeah.
Right? But a lot of stuff had to happen. And for the development, if you will, of the two of them, it was necessary. And quite honestly, I thought Kathy gave in pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the, that's the next critique, really, is the character development of Kathy Hale. Well, Faye Dunaway's character, Kathy Hale, while crucial to the plot, sometimes feels underdeveloped and somewhat peripheral. Her motivations and actions can appear inconsistent, and I think this is a good critique, which can detract from the overall narrative. Now, there are a few times when I thought that she was inconsistent or changed her mind or actions too quickly and went all in so quickly. There's not a lot of backstory to her, and I don't think we need a lot of backstory to her character, but Faye Dunaway played the character well. I mean, we saw her 8 years earlier in Bonnie and Clyde, 1967. And okay, like we said, she's no Bonnie Clyde here, but neither was she supposed to be Bonnie Clyde here. So some people think her character was flat, and you could see some elements of that, perhaps.
Yes,
But
you know,
I don't think it's a legit.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd call her character flat. I mean, yes, they could have done more with her.
I think she is a flat character.
That's it. That's by design, right? She's an anonymous person that he just happens to pull into this thing.
Exactly.
And quite honestly, there's not too many movies where you can hear a character call themselves a spy effer. She says the whole word. I mean, what a line. I mean, come on. Now,
That was one of the funny lines there that I thought was a little out of place, but okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there was one thing that I thought was funny based on Faye Dunaway, not her character Kathy, but on Faye Dunaway herself. And it has to do with another trope that goes all the way back to the 1928 silent movie Spione. And we also see it in From Russia with Love.
Just had an episode on Spione.
Now, in 3 Days of the Condor, it's not as obvious as the other two. In fact, I'd heard that it was there, and once I got to the scene it was, I had to go frame by frame to see it. Now, I saw it on a regular DVD, not on a Blu-ray, and I think it would have been easier to pick up on a Blu-ray.
Okay,
But
I watched it on Blu-ray.
You've seen it on Blu-ray. It was probably sharper for you. Now, right at the end of the movie, during the final conversation, we see part of a movie marquee. And again, you have to look hard to catch this.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's really two shots that have this in here.
Yeah.
And the first shot, we see Faye Dunaway's name and part of the movie title, Ferno, Ferno.
Yeah.
Then a little bit later, you see another part of that same marquee that says The Tower. Now, that marquee, I think, was on a theater that was showing the 1974 movie, The Towering Inferno, in which Faye Dunaway plays Susan.
Yeah.
So, because they filmed this during a stretch when Inferno was playing in theaters.
Yeah.
I don't know if this marquee was made just for the scene or was a marquee that was on a real theater playing The Towering Inferno and they wanted to get the shot in on it. But in any case,
it's there.
It kind of brought me back to the posters of Metropolis that was in Spione and the Call Me Buona on the sign of the building in From Marshall with Love. So I have another case of a spy movie with a call out to another movie made by either the director or one of the stars.
Yeah, you can see it in the Blu-ray, but you could miss it easily, very easily.
Yeah. Like I said, I had to go frame by frame to catch it.
Yeah, you're just watching the movie real time. You're not going to see it. All right. Another critique of the dated elements. Okay, I hate when people say this. I mean, this movie was released in 1975. Let's take a second to think about that. 1975. Okay, so as in any movie that deals with current technology, well, when you look at it almost 50 years later, the technology has changed. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
From 1975 to 2024, yeah. But looking at it for the time at which it took place, it was pretty cool. Turner's fiddling and manipulating the telephone banks, which we talked about, was actually brilliant for the time. Now, it is outdated, yeah, and social attitudes might look a little different now, but that can always be an issue. Look at the Bond movies from early on to what they do now, the womanizing and the slapping and whatever. Things have changed. So it's always an issue. So I say, get over it. This is a common issue with older movies, but can affect the viewing experience for those unfamiliar with the historical context of the movies. But I just think, nah.
Yeah, see, I hate this criticism as well because I get kind of nostalgia.
Maybe they get bored with it. It's old technology, boring.
I like when it's there. I mean,
yeah.
The only bummer part is we didn't see any punch cards, but we did see an IBM key punch machine. But I just didn't see any of the cards. But that said, as I alluded to before, they were doing some very advanced things on that CIA computer. And AI is a hot topic now. So it wasn't dated in that regard. Yeah, the equipment they used were dated, duh. But the concepts really weren't.
Yeah. All right, let's look at another criticism, the romantic subplot. Come on. All right, the romantic relationship between Turner and Hale develops quickly and somewhat implausibly. I agree. That is true. Critics argue that this subplot feels forced and detracts from the film's main storyline. I agree with this critique that it seems forced and implausible that all of this developed so quickly. And yeah, the movie is an hour and 57 minutes long, and a lot is going on. So we mentioned this before in Faye Dunaway's portrayal of Kathy Hale, and she does seem inconsistent at times, rushed in the development of the relationship, without doubt. It was a whirlwind of development that is unlikely and implausible to take place.
Yeah, it was really an extremely quick Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. Lorenzo Semple Jr. and David Raphael wrote the screenplay, which altered the book's timeline and setting from Washington, D.C. to New York City. Now, I didn't read the original book, but okay, they changed some things. What could they have done better? I'm not sure. They did not have time to develop it more, but they tried to develop the relationship with the actors' eyes, both, like we mentioned once earlier, both Dunaway's and Redford's eyes show us that things were changing between them. And that spoke more than the timeline, I thought, between what was going on between them. Just key in on that aspect when you're watching their scenes together, their eyes looking at each other and what they do with their eyes. That,
I actually
sums
feel,
it up.
I actually feel most romantic subplots end up deterring from the viewing of the movie.
Yeah.
And I agree, this one happened really quickly. But if they took longer, people would have complained about the pacing. So it's a no-win situation. I mean, it's why I don't like romantic relationships in most spy movies. Now, one-night stands are different, but this is a relationship that developed.
Yeah, yeah.
Also on this topic, in the 1998 George Clooney, Jennifer Lopez movie, Out of Sight, they actually call out the romantic subplot from 3 Days of the Condor in Out of Sight. And Lopez's character didn't think the romantic subplot was realistic.
Yeah,
so you've got one movie bringing up this exact criticism of 3 Days of the Condor.
Yeah, but she played a critical role in the movie. So there you go. All right, let's look at the ambiguous ending, our fifth point here. Basically, I like endings that are endings to the movie. I don't like continuation movies, and
you're wrong, Dan.
maybe they intended there to be one more for this movie, because James Grady, the author, did write Shadow of the Condor in 1978. And so maybe they were thinking they would do a sequel. I don't know. But Grady did think that Robert Redford upstaged his character, his hero. And so he moved on to write other novels. So maybe that wasn't the case at all. I don't know. But the film's ending is intentionally ambiguous. Yes. Which it can be seen as either a strength or a weakness.
It's a strength to me.
Some people appreciate its open-ended nature, while others may find it unsatisfying or frustrating. Max von Sydow's character, Joubert, warned Turner that he will be looking over his shoulder always. For me, it is less than satisfactory that it ended that way. I think they could have made one change that could have made it more acceptable. Not a big change either. It could have been a couple of words, but they didn't. By adding an if scenario to the end, if something happens, then okay.
Yeah, now see, I like the ambiguity here.
Okay.
So many different things could have happened if we went to day 4 of the Condor or months after the ending conversation. And we don't need to see that.
Okay.
Your thoughts on what may happen are in your mind.
Yeah.
You can take it however your mind works. Plus, this is espionage and it's life and it's Big Brother, the deep state. It just keeps going. It never ends. And situations can change quickly.
Yeah.
Here, in 3 Days of the Condor, the mission, if you'll let me call it that, was over. What happens next isn't important to this movie.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my all-time favorite ambiguous endings was the TV series The Sopranos. And I know a lot of people hated this ending. That show cut to a black screen at the end of it. Did Tony get shot? Did life just go on? We don't know, and I think that's cool. What do we think should happen next? Let our mind go with that.
Yeah.
We see something similar here, and I'm fine with it. I don't need the if scenario you mentioned, Dev.
All right. All right.
Life comes at us fast, and different ifs pop up. They didn't need to add them here.
All right. At least they didn't add a Bob Newhart ending. Okay. The last thing we see on the screen is Turner looking over his shoulder. That says it all. Just what Joubert had predicted and said would happen to him. So this is where we are left. So, okay, I'll accept that for now. All right, 3 Days of the Condor remains a classic in the spy movie genre and generally has been well received as a very good movie, praised for its intelligence and interesting plot, strong performances, as we said, and timely political commentary. We believe the movie's strengths far outweigh any negatives and weaknesses you can come up with, cementing its place in the broad scope of espionage and spy movies of all times. It is a keeper and still is relevant today.
And if you haven't watched it, we recommend you do.
Yeah. All right. That's a wrap as the Condor swoops back to Earth. This has been Dan.
And Tom.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Subscribe to our show through your favorite podcast app and to our YouTube channel as well. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you spending time with us. Thanks.